You want someone to share a room with?
Long before Frank Dux set foot on a plane bound for Hong Kong, he was more than just another young man with a dream. From early childhood, whispers of combat, discipline, and ancient rites surrounded his upbringing. Frank didn't grow up on playground tales of superheroes or Hollywood legends. Instead, he absorbed stories of warriors from distant lands, training under harsh conditions to master body and spirit alike. His unwavering fascination with martial arts led him down paths rarely explored by ordinary boys. Rather than trading punches and neighborhood scrapes, he sought genuine instruction, guidance from masters who embodied tradition and respect. As Frank matured, he cultivated a reputation for determination that bordered on obsession. Day after day, he honed his reflexes, strengthened his resolve, and refined techniques that pushed his body past limits most would never attempt. Some questioned his motivations, others admired his unwavering dedication, yet no one could deny that Frank was different. The fire inside him burned brighter than most, fueled by a yearning for purpose and a desire to test himself beyond familiar boundaries. Then, one day, whispers began circulating about an event shrouded in secrecy, an underground tournament where fighters from around the world tested their skills for honor and respect. It was called the Kumite. Few spoke openly about it, even fewer believed it truly existed. But for Frank, hearing the name alone stirred something deep within. It awakened a desire not just to compete, but to discover what lay beyond the life he knew, to confront challenges that would shape his destiny in ways he could not yet foresee. Frank's decision to leave home was neither sudden nor simple. He understood the gravity of what he was choosing. Leaving meant stepping into a realm with no guarantees, no familiar faces, and no safety net. It was a choice rooted in his belief that life's greatest lessons are learned far from one's comfort zone. His family, though proud of his enthusiasm, expressed worry. They feared for his well-being and questioned whether the Kumite was real or merely legend. But Frank listened more to his instincts than to the doubts voiced around him. In preparation for his journey, he gathered essentials, said his farewells, and steeled himself for the unknown. The airport was crowded, full of travelers chasing business deals, family reunions, and foreign vacations. Frank's purpose was entirely different. His mission was personal, spiritual, and intimidating. Each step toward the gate felt both exhilarating and frightening, a collision of emotion and anticipation. The flight ahead would carry him to another world, one where rules were unwritten and survival depended on courage as much as skill. Upon arrival in Hong Kong, the city's vibrant energy washed over him. Neon lights gleamed against rainy streets. Sounds of bustling markets, honking traffic, and unfamiliar dialects created sensory overload. Frank felt both excited and humbled. This was no longer his hometown. This was a vast, pulsating metropolis with millions of stories, and now his own story was woven into its tapestry. Determined to find the Kumite's entrance, Frank navigated through crowded alleyways, local eateries, and hidden corners unknown to tourists. Every conversation held a possibility. Every stranger could be a clue. His journey became a blend of intuition, resilience, and sheer persistence. As Frank's search for the Kumite intensified, he encountered individuals who would come to shape his experience in Hong Kong. The city was a maze, but in that maze, Frank discovered unexpected friendship. Among the first was a local guide named Victor. Victor was not a martial artist by trade, but he understood the city's hidden underbelly. Fluent in multiple dialects and quick to sense visitors' intentions, Victor was both curious and cautious when he first met Frank. Victor watched Frank move through crowded streets, admire local sights, and ask questions that revealed a deeper purpose than mere tourism. Drawn by that intensity, Victor offered to help. There was no immediate trust, only mutual curiosity and the shared sense that there was more to this journey than met the eye. Together, they visited obscure markets, climbed stairways leading to quiet rooftop views, and observed martial artists practicing in hidden courtyards. During one late-night conversation over steaming bowls of noodles, Frank shared fragments of his story. He spoke of honor and discipline, of training far from where most would dare. Victor listened, intrigued by the passion and clarity in Frank's voice. Though Victor had no personal interest in fighting, he came to respect Frank's unwavering focus and genuine intentions. In time, Victor connected Frank with others who had ties to the Kumite. These were people who whispered of the tournament's existence, but rarely spoke of its location or participants. Frank's determination began to open doors. His reputation as an outsider with purpose granted him access to conversations others might have avoided. Through these new connections, Frank learned more about the martial arts world beyond his own training. Fighters from dozens of countries had come to Hong Kong seeking glory, testing their strength against formidable opponents. The Kumite became more than a whispered legend. It became a destination, a goal, a culmination of everything Frank had dedicated his life toward achieving. Once Frank glimpsed the possibility of entering the Kumite, the reality of what lay ahead became clear. Preparation would be grueling. Though he already possessed significant skill, he knew the tournament demanded peak performance, both mentally and physically. With Victor's help, Frank found secluded locations where training could continue away from prying eyes. There, amidst quiet courtyards and bamboo groves, he pushed his body in ways that tested his endurance, technique, and mental focus. Each sunrise brought a new challenge. Some days involved repetitive strikes against resistant surfaces. Other days required mastering balance and breath control. Frank's muscles ached from exertion, yet his resolve did not falter. He reminded himself that pain was temporary, while honor and purpose endured. Every drop of sweat served as proof of his commitment. More than physical strength, Frank focused on breathing, centering his awareness, and anticipating the unpredictable nature of combat. He visualized opponents, imagined strategies, and replayed moves until they became instinct. Through controlled meditation, he learned to quiet his fears and sharpen his instincts. Frank knew that reflexes could win battles, but clarity of mind would see him through the toughest moments in the ring. Alongside his physical training, Frank learned about his would-be opponents. Stories circulated of fighters with frightening reputations. Some were towering heavyweights with brute force. Others were small but lightning-fast technicians. Each one carried a distinctive style. Each represented a unique challenge. Frank studied descriptions of their strengths and weaknesses, incorporating mental scenarios into his regimen. Victor watched Frank's transformation with growing admiration. The city's chaotic pace seemed to fade when Frank trained. Time became measured by breath and heartbeat, not by clocks or passing crowds. Every session brought Frank closer to the Kumite, but also deeper into an understanding of himself. In that realm, training was not merely about winning, it was about becoming something greater than anyone had previously believed possible. Every city has secrets hidden beneath its gleaming facade, and Hong Kong was no exception. Beyond bustling streets and night markets lay a realm far removed from the tourist guides and bright lights. It was here, in the shadows of warehouses and deserted industrial corridors, that the underground community surrounding the Kumite truly thrived. Fighters, trainers, and curious onlookers gathered in this covert network, exchanging rumors and betting off futures that none would openly acknowledge. Frank could feel the shift in energy as he drew nearer to this concealed world. There was a raw, intense atmosphere, a mix of admiration and trepidation. Talk of the upcoming tournament spread in hushed tones beneath the clatter of machinery and distant hum of engines. Those who spoke of it did so with reverence. knowing they were touching upon something both forbidden and revered. Among these crowds, Frank encountered individuals who had seen previous Kumite events, fighters who bore tattoos, scars, and stories that made lesser souls tremble. Yet even in this environment of hardened warriors, Frank's presence drew interest. People sensed his commitment, his discipline, and the calm intensity he carried within. Some were skeptical, others were intrigued. A few offered words of advice, acknowledging that Frank was closer than most to entering the Kumite itself. Victor remained by his side, navigating tight alleyways and guiding him through a labyrinth of clandestine meetings. Together, they attended informal gatherings where fighters displayed their skills, traded techniques, and tested one another in improvised bouts. Frank watched carefully, absorbing every nuance of movement and strategy. He began to understand that the underground world was not merely about violence, but about respect. Fighters here competed not out of hatred, but out of admiration for mastery itself. Stories of past Kumite champions circulated with awe. Some spoke of fighters whose names lived in whispers across continents. Others cautioned about the unforgiving nature of the tournament, that only those who possessed unshakable conviction could hope to endure what lay ahead. Frank listened to each tale with solemn focus, his mind weaving them into the tapestry of his own expectations. By the time night fell, the underground world receded into darkness. Footsteps echoed down empty streets, and the city's mainstream returned to view. Yet Frank's understanding of the Kumite expanded, and with it, his sense of purpose. What once seemed distant and mythical now felt within reach, a challenge worthy of every sacrifice he had made along the way. The chaotic rhythm of Hong Kong's streets faded each time Frank stepped into a secluded courtyard to continue his training. Here, in the quiet space just beyond the city's ceaseless noise, he encountered fighters who had already committed themselves to the Kumite. These individuals came from disparate cultures and backgrounds, yet within that courtyard, they shared a singular unity: respect for the discipline of martial arts. Frank's presence did not go unnoticed. As fighters warmed up, stretching sinewy limbs and testing reflexes against one another, whispers traveled through the group. Some observed him with curiosity. Others offered nods of acknowledgement, subtle but significant. They recognized something familiar in Frank, an integrity of purpose that resonated among warriors who had long abandoned pretense. In time, a few of the seasoned fighters approached him. Their questions were direct, framed with the candor born of experience. Frank spoke humbly, sharing aspects of his training, his motivations, and the philosophy that guided his actions. Rather than arrogance or bravado, there was clarity in his words, an honesty that deepened others' respect. In return, they offered insight into their own styles and backgrounds, revealing how each had adapted their techniques over years of practice. Some had trained in remote dojos, others learned by traveling across continents. Each journey was unique, yet bound by a shared devotion to martial arts. As these exchanges continued, Frank learned more than just physical tactics. He absorbed lessons about humility and honor, virtues that transcended mere technique. He discovered that true strength was not measured by brute force, but by the capacity to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. These bonds formed with fellow fighters created a sense of camaraderie amidst competition. Here, amidst sweat and disciplined effort, friendships took shape, fueled by mutual admiration and the shared purpose that drew them all toward the Kumite. Victor, observing from the periphery, recognized a transformation in Frank. He saw confidence growing, but also humility, a rare combination that distinguished true practitioners from those driven merely by ego. This recognition from others, especially those seasoned in combat, further motivated Frank, instilling within him an even deeper commitment to the path he had chosen. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, the courtyard had become more than a training ground. It had become a place where warriors connected not only through skill, but through respect, discipline, and the unspoken understanding that the journey they shared was as important as the battles that awaited them. Frank had grown accustomed to pushing his body beyond ordinary limits, but nothing quite prepared him for the moment when he first stood among a circle of fighters eager to test him. These were not casual sparring partners. They were individuals who had dedicated years, sometimes decades, mastering their styles and refining their techniques to an art form. Their gaze was steady, respectful, and quietly challenging. The courtyard buzzed with anticipation. Fighters took turns demonstrating their abilities, some with explosive speed, others with fluid grace that flowed like water. The air carried the scent of sweat, determination, and unspoken rivalry. Frank stepped forward, welcoming the opportunity to engage with these seasoned practitioners, knowing each confrontation would reveal insights into his own readiness. Each step he took was measured, intentional, imbued with the discipline he had cultivated through months of rigorous preparation. His first opponent approached with composed confidence, feet rooted like a tree while hands moved with precision. Their initial clash was a conversation conducted in strikes and blocks, each action resonating with deliberate intensity. Frank reacted instinctively, applying techniques he'd practiced countless times until they became second nature. Yet this wasn't training against shadows or imagined opponents. This was real, dynamic, and unpredictable. Word spread quickly through the gathered fighters that Frank's proficiency was exceptional. Some watched in admiration, others with curiosity about how far his capabilities could extend. Each exchange tested his adaptability, pushing him to refine timing, improve footwork, and maintain clarity of mind even when fatigue crept in. With every match, Frank saw not just his physical strength, but his mental focus deepen in response to the varying styles he encountered. While skill was essential, Frank discovered something else during these tests: resilience. It was one thing to execute a perfect move in isolation, and another to sustain composure when confronted by an opponent who refused to relent. Sweat dripped from his brow as the afternoon sun dipped lower, yet Frank remained steady in his breathing, grounded in the moment and fully present with each challenge. By the end of the day, Frank had sparred with fighters representing a spectrum of martial arts traditions. Some moves had surprised him, others reaffirmed the foundational training he had pursued for so long. Each interaction left him not only physically invigorated, but mentally enriched, deepening his understanding of conflict, respect, and the unifying language of combat. In those moments, he felt closer than ever to the Kumite's threshold, carrying not just techniques in his body, but wisdom in his mind and spirit. In the days that followed his test of skill, Frank found himself wrestling with something deeper than physical challenge. Each night, after the courtyard emptied and only silence remained, his thoughts traced patterns of what honor truly meant. He wasn't just here to win. He was here to understand what it meant to represent his training, his teachers, and the principles that brought him to this point. That understanding was elusive, less about trophies and more about embodiment of values that martial arts had ingrained within his very core. Frank immersed himself in reflection, walking through dimly lit streets where lanterns flickered like distant stars. The city's pulse slowed after midnight, offering quiet spaces for introspection. Memories of his training back home surfaced, teachers who taught patience before strength, humility before pride, and discipline before impulse. These lessons had guided him this far, but now he felt called to integrate them more fully into his identity as a martial artist. Victor noticed this shift in Frank. He had observed him navigating crowds with ease, training rigorously, and earning respect among fighters. Now, Victor sensed something more profound, a depth of understanding that went beyond skill. It was the kind of presence that inspired others without demanding attention, a quiet yet undeniable force. While other fighters practiced their moves with outward intensity, Frank's demeanor suggested an inward journey taking shape. During one quiet evening, an elder martial artist approached Frank. The elder spoke softly, eyes steady, voice tempered by years of experience. He spoke not of techniques, but of tradition, how martial arts were a bridge between physical prowess and spiritual equilibrium. Strength, he said, is not merely measured in strikes landed or battles won. True strength lies in balance, between confidence and humility, between fierce focus and compassionate restraint. Frank listened intently. His heart recognized the truth in those words. He thought about his path and the countless hours spent chasing perfection in form. Yet now he saw that mastery extended beyond physical ability. It was present in how one carried oneself outside the ring, how one faced adversity with grace, how one honored those who came before and those yet to be met. These reflections shaped Frank's perspective in ways that rigorous training alone never could. The Kumite was not merely a competition. It was a convergence of tradition, philosophy, and the essence of what it meant to be a true martial artist. As Frank continued his preparations, he carried with him something intangible yet powerful, a deepening certainty that his journey was not simply about proving strength, but embodying a deeper truth. After weeks of training, observation, and quiet contemplation, Frank sensed that the moment he had prepared for was drawing near. The murmur of anticipation swept through the hidden circles connected to the Kumite, reaching every corner where dedicated fighters gathered. In every whispered rumor and every exchanged glance, the word Kumite carried both reverence and intensity. For Frank, the anticipation wasn't merely about competition. It was about stepping onto a stage where his entire journey, every sacrifice, every early morning, every blistered muscle would be honored in a way words never could express. The morning air felt different as he rose before dawn. There was a calmness within him that his friends and fellow practitioners had noticed. Rather than anxiety, there was focus. Rather than fear, there was acceptance. As the first pale light of day stretched across the horizon, Frank reviewed his regiment one final time. He moved with intention, embracing the rhythm of discipline that had guided him this far. Victor arrived with news. Those already confirmed for the Kumite were gathering at a secluded training ground not far from the harbor. The location remained secret to most, revealed only to those who had demonstrated dedication and respect. The journey there was quiet, illuminated by gentle wisps of fog weaving through narrow pathways. Frank walked steadily, breathing slowly, sensing each moment for what it truly was, a culmination of countless steps taken long before this one. When they reached the hidden ground, the sight that greeted Frank was unlike anything he had experienced. Dozens of fighters stood in groups, preparing quietly for what lay ahead. Some were stretching near wooden posts. Others moved through subtle kata sequences, their forms blending grace with exacting precision. The air was charged with focus and self-respect, not chaos. Every presence seemed to emanate personal stories already rich with challenge and endurance. As Frank stepped further into the gathering, he was met with respectful bows and steady nods. No words were exchanged at first, none were needed. In that moment, every fighter recognized the shared purpose pulsating through the group. Here, in this hidden realm, distinctions of nationality, style, or language melted away. What remained was a singular convergence of souls drawn together by mastery, courage, and the quiet determination to test themselves against the world's finest. Frank felt something in his chest, calm determination perhaps, or an affirmation of the journey that brought him here. The threshold had arrived. He stood among warriors who had dedicated years of their lives to reach this point. Some bore the scars of battle, others carried trophies of past victories. Yet in every eye there was a reflection of something familiar, the drive to face the unknown, to embrace challenge as a teacher, to honor tradition through purposeful action. On that ground, beneath the gentle gleam of early morning light, Frank prepared to step forward into a chapter of his life long dreamed of, but only now truly within reach. The Kumite awaited, unyielding in its challenge, rich in tradition, and worthy of every sacrifice that had forged his path. The air that morning lingered with a quiet intensity, as if the very atmosphere held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Frank stood among other contenders, each one poised with a blend of focus, discipline, and contemplation. There were no boasts, no taunts, only the shared understanding that they had arrived at something far greater than a mere competition. It was an arena where respect and tradition intersected with grit and perseverance. For Frank, every heartbeat felt like an echo of all he had overcome to reach this moment. He wasn't just another fighter seeking glory. He was someone who had dedicated years to understanding what martial arts truly meant. The Kumite was not just an event, it was the living embodiment of every lesson he had learned, every hardship he had faced, every dawn spent training before the world awoke. He felt his breath steady, senses sharp, and mind clear. Others around him reflected similar intensity. Some stood silent, eyes closed, engaging in final breaths of meditation. Others exchanged brief, respectful nods, a reminder that even in moments of potential contest, honor came first. This quiet exchange of mutual regard resonated deeply with Frank, reinforcing a sense of unity among skilled individuals who had chosen paths rooted in discipline. Victor remained at the periphery, offering a reassuring presence rather than distraction. He had watched Frank's journey from the moment they met, seen the growth, witnessed the transformation. Though Victor was not a fighter, he understood what it meant to bear witness to someone pursuing something that transcended simple ambition. As the first light of day dipped fully into morning, the call came that signaled all contestants were to gather at the threshold leading into the Kumite's hidden arena. Fighters adjusted their stances, tightened their wraps, and prepared mentally for the challenge ahead. A hushed wave of anticipation spread through the group. Hearts quickened, breaths synchronized with the moment's gravity, and each individual stood ready to answer the summons in their own way. Frank closed his eyes for a breath, feeling the distant echo of his teacher's voices in his mind, reminders of discipline, humility, respect, and conviction. He opened his eyes and stepped forward with intention, fully present in the moment. Every step toward the arena's entrance felt sacred, as if he crossed not just a physical boundary, but an invisible boundary between preparation and purpose. Though the looming battles would test every ounce of his skill, strength, and spirit, Frank carried with him not fear, but respect for the path that brought him there. The Kumite awaited, mysterious and formidable, a culmination of legend and challenge. In that instant before the first bell rang, Frank stood not as a boy dreaming of destiny, but as a man fully committed to the journey ahead, rooted in honor, resolve, and the unshakable belief in his own readiness.